Hello, this is Sean Dixon, and I'm here with Brian Patterson and John Gonzalez. We are each returned mission presidents for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and this is the Preach My Gospel Mission Prep Podcast. We are here to help prepare you to become successful Preach My Gospel missionaries and lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ. In each episode, we explore powerful concepts from every chapter in Preach My Gospel. We will talk to returned missionaries and others about their experiences and insights. You can even use this podcast to get Institute credit. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the podcast. We are excited to be back with you. Last week, John filled in as Brian and I were not available to be part of the podcast, and so glad that him and David Christensen had a really meaningful conversation about mission distractions. I'm back today. Brian's still on the road, but we are excited to be back at it. And this is just on the heels of the announcement that just came out about the new edition of Preach My Gospel. And this is going to provide a great opportunity for us to continue to dive in and see what some of the differences are in the new updated manual. And we will take several episodes to go through that, right, John?
Right.
So we look forward to that. That's coming. Today, what we have for you is an opportunity to talk about senior missions. As former mission leaders, John and I know Brian can tell you that having senior missionaries in your mission is golden. It is the most incredible resource that a mission can have. And the area presidency, particularly here in Utah, has come out and just stated that there is a tremendous need for more senior couples. The ones that are out there are doing incredible work, but there is a great need for more senior couples. In fact, in a fireside broadcast, Elder Pearson asked if you're at all able to try to prepare to serve a mission away from home, as well as a local mission from home, which could be like a church service mission. And so that's kind of the mandate. That's the direction. And so we thought an episode where we could talk about senior missions, answer questions, have a conversation with some senior missionaries that have served and are currently serving would be helpful.
And I think most of our listeners, if not all of our listeners, will interact with senior missionaries. I remember when serving as a mission leader, some of the calls I would get from young district leaders who didn't quite understand. President, Elder so-and-so, they went to bed at 8:30. and I had to say, well, Elder, that's okay. So it's important for everyone to understand the roles and some of the little differences.
Well, and I think for those of our young listeners who are listening to this episode, you need to understand the resource that you have having access to these senior missionary couples. In many instances, you may get closer to them than your own mission president and his wife, than your own mission leaders. I know my daughter, she served in the Tennessee Nashville mission, and her first 6 months, she was just off in this far out corner of the mission, not around the mission president hardly at all, but there was a senior couple there that became like her grandparents. And I know when he passed away, it was like losing a grandfather. This was later after she returned, but they had such a profound impact on her adjustment to the mission and just the overall experience she had. So anyway, we're here with Elder and Sister Tuckett, and I call them Elder and Sister Tuckett. This is Roger and Susan Tuckett, but they are currently serving a church service mission from home, but they previously served a mission to the Ohio Columbus mission. So Elder and Sister Tuckett, will you just take a second to introduce yourselves to our audience?
You bet. Well, we're really happy to be here with you today. As Brother Dixon said, we served in the Ohio Columbus mission. In the office, Elder Tuckett was the finance secretary, and I was the mission secretary. And we've been home for about 6 months, but we just loved being a part of the mission, that missionary spirit. And honestly, I think I learned more from the young missionaries than I think they ever learned from me. And we had the opportunity to associate with them quite often. in the office. Like I said, we've been home for 6 months, and a couple of months ago, an opportunity came our way to do a church service mission. So now we're serving from home, and we're training or mentoring senior missionaries who have been called to serve in mission offices. There's so much to learn, and they don't really get enough of that when they get to the MTC. So we're kind of giving them a little more information before they get to the MTC. It's all done over Zoom when Zoom decides to work for us, and it's been great so far. We really are enjoying it.
That's great. Elder Tucker, what would you add?
Yeah, and just the fact that we were going to introduce ourselves a little bit. We've been married for 43 years. We've have 6 children and 17 grands, and we left those to go serve, and it was a great blessing in our lives, a huge, huge blessing. We became closer together personally, but we had such a fantastic experience. Like she said, learning from the young missionaries. Many of them said, you're to go out and help them and guard them and protect them and be a mentor to them. But I felt like it was almost reversed because we learned so much from them, and we're so impressed by these young people with the call and the mantle of the missionary calling. So we just had a fantastic experience, and the young missionaries were inspirational to us.
Great. Elder Tuckett, could you just share your professional life?
Well, I think the thing I was going to mention is that my professional life had very little to do with my calling as a missionary, and I've had a little bit of anxiety at first. They said there was a need for office couples, and that was kind of the high priority. We said, hey, let's do it. I mean, I love computers. I was a junior high educator, so when I got the call to serve in the office, I thought, yeah, I can do this. But it was a struggle at first. I had a lot to learn, and I just feel like I learned a whole new profession because I learned so much, and I grew into the calling.
Well, thank you for taking your time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. We also have with us Brother Blaine Hales. He's actually calling in on the phone, and so we're excited to have him in the conversation with us today. Blaine, will you just take a minute to introduce yourself and your family, your profession, and as well as the mission that you were able to serve?
Yes, thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here and share some of my experiences. I'm actually representing myself, Blaine Hales, and also my wife, Sue Hales, who couldn't be here this afternoon or this morning. And we live in Spanish Fork, and we've been married for about 36 years. We have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. And we served in the Zambia Lusaka mission in Africa.
People are gasping right now.
Yeah, that was a wonderful mission, and we feel lucky to have been called to serve there. And just as a side note, when I was in Zambia, and I worked in the office as well, I was on a Zoom meeting and saw Roger Tuckett in one of the Zoom meetings as well. So it's amazing how all of this fits together.
That's great.
We both work in the office. I as Roger mentioned, there is a huge need for missionaries that will serve in the office. And we only had one couple there, and I was over finances, housing, and vehicles. And my wife, Sue, was the mission nurse as well as the mission secretary. So we had a lot on our plate, but it was a wonderful experience. Loved it.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your profession, Blaine, before you went on your mission.
The first half of my life, I was a real estate appraiser, and then the second half, I have done commercial real estate development. So I actually still have my job as a developer and a property manager over the properties we own. So I was able to leave before I really quote retired. But my wife Sue retired early, and we left while we were healthy and we could do this.
That's great. Well, Roger, you were kind of talking about how your profession wasn't directly related to what you did, but I think being an educator and so forth, I think played in. I think Blaine, with you, with having properties that you managed and so forth, must have helped you a lot as you were working with apartments and things like that down there in Africa.
Yes, it was very helpful, and I enjoyed that part the most, working over housing.
I think it's such a blessing to have senior couples serve, because when I served a mission as a young missionary, there were young missionaries working in the office. And it's such a tremendous blessing then to allow young missionaries to focus on what they're able to do and allow senior, seasoned individuals to kind of administer the ongoing office.
I can add to that when we were called and preparing to leave, we would answer questions. People would ask, "Well, what are you going to do? Where are you going?" And almost every time we would get comments that, "Oh, I remember my mission. The senior couple. Oh, we loved them. Oh, it's so awesome. We're so glad for it." And we'd get that feedback all the time, and it kind of helped us gain a little confidence that this. And then when we got there in the mission field, I found that there was such a special bond between the young missionaries and the senior missionaries. It's something you really can't explain, but we just had such a wonderful relationship, and they even liked me. Couldn't believe it.
Well, and it's amazing to me how you can watch them get off the plane and immediately have this love for each one of them. It's just very instant, and I think that's so important. Those young missionaries need to know that they're loved, and when they're away from home and family, sometimes they just need to know that there's someone there watching over them and taking care of them and loving them.
It's a gift of the Spirit that comes to you,
Absolutely.
isn't it, as you serve? I have to say that as a mission leader, the senior couples were like my best friends. Like, they were so valuable, and I just kind of felt like they were this really special resource that I could use this chip to take care of this issue or that issue or whatever, and strategically use these couples that the Lord had sent to our mission. Some of them served in the mission office. We also had others that were called as what they call MLS missionaries, which is member leader support missionaries. And they would be sent out to maybe a struggling branch or an area that just really needed some seasoned leadership, that didn't have quite the leadership that other branches would have. Or in the case of someone that maybe just a big list of as less active people in a particular ward that could benefit from having somebody that could go out there and minister and lead.
Well, in the ward I currently live in, we have the stake has a live-at-home senior couple who are assigned to the entire stake to help us reach out to the less actives. And they're a tremendous resource. As an Elders Quorum president, where I serve now, it is just a tremendous resource to use this good brother and good sister to go into homes where otherwise it's a challenge.
Yeah. So depending on your circumstances, there's opportunities for you to serve from home, like you're doing right now, or an opportunity to be called somewhere in the world that could take you as far as Africa. Let me start off with just a couple questions. When I was talking to Blaine before this meeting, he said, I had so many questions before I went out to serve that I didn't really have the answers to. And I'm like, well, Blaine, write those questions down. And so both of them have provided a variety of questions, and we've added to this. But maybe the first question I'd like to ask you is, did you always plan on serving a senior mission? And what was it that motivated you to finally pull the trigger to put your papers in and to prepare to serve? Blaine, could you start us off and tell us your thoughts on that? What led you to applying to be a full-time missionary?
I would have to say that Sue and I discussed this for years. We talked about it, and we always said we're going to do that. And so it was something that we had personally committed to long before the time came. And when the time came, what motivated us to really put this into action was, first of all, knowing that there was a huge need for senior couples, and we want to help when we can. And I think the biggest motivating factor of all was we counted our blessings, and we felt like the Lord had blessed us abundantly, and it would be extremely ungrateful for us not to go out and share with others that were less fortunate and those that were serving already. And so that was the big motivator for us, is all the blessings that we'd received and a deep feeling that we needed to go out and help and serve.
Thank you. How about you, Elder and Sister Tuckett?
Yeah, I agree with Blaine as far as feeling ungrateful if I didn't serve a mission. I didn't serve as a youth when I was that age. Well, I didn't know any of my friends that served missions as a sister missionary. But as I watched my children serve a mission, that was one of the great motivators for me. And I thought, well, if they can do that, then I can do that. So they set the example for me. And we had talked about it too a lot. And I specifically remember sitting in a fireside where the speaker was speaking about senior missionaries, and the feeling just came to me, yes, you need to do it. You need to start planning for it. And as far as when the timing was right, I don't know. I kept feeling like we need to do it soon while we're still healthy and strong and have the financial means to support ourselves. And once we made that decision, I think it's important to set a date and then start making plans and then watch the Lord work miracles so that plan will happen for you.
I just wanted to throw in, maybe selfish, maybe not selfish, but I felt like that I wanted the blessings. And I've always been in the market for more blessings. But I know that I look back at my parents when we were young married, and they had never served missions, and they got recruited by a really kind mission president. Said, hey, we need you. Come on out, and I'll get you here. And they did for 1 year. At that time, my six children in my family, 3 of them were temple worthy and 3 were not. And they went out on that mission, and by the time they returned, all 6 had been gone to the temple. And I thought of that great blessing in my family, and I thought, the Lord's there, and he's going to bless us in whatever way. It's not going to happen that way to everyone, but in our family it did. And there was a huge, I just felt I needed those blessings in one way or another.
Yeah, that's awesome. The timing is an interesting question for people. I like how you said you knew you had the means and you had the health, and instead of waiting, you immediately gave your very best to the Lord. And I think it's interesting that at the 2 most selfish times of our life, when you're graduating from high school and you've now become an adult, for most people in the world, that's me time. That's the time to go off and do whatever I want to do. I don't have to have my parents telling me what to do anymore. And what does the Lord say right at that time? Don't think about yourself, right? Completely lose yourself in my work. And he takes them out of that selfish mode as they launch their life. And probably the next most selfish time of life is as we retire. We're like, okay, it's me time. I've been doing what I've needed to do. And then what does the Lord say at that time? This is a time to totally lose yourself and to give yourself in the work. And I love that idea of, hey, this is the time I'm going to give my very best to the Lord to help go out and serve him.
And I hear you say that you made the decision while your health provided you with those opportunities. And I think that is an important factor. But I would also say when my wife and I served as mission leaders in California, we had a brother and sister who were on their, I believe, 6th mission. She was in a walker, and they were live at home at that time. They had served several, Australia, someplace else in the States, someplace where it was awfully cold. Antarctic. I don't know if we have a mission there, but I was just amazed. And they were on their 6th mission, and like I say, she was in a walker. They were live at home. They worked in the office, and every once in a while, the brother would repeat himself, so his memory was. But what a wonderful blessing to us, not only to have them help us in the mission, but also the wealth of experience they brought back from having 5, 6 different experiences and blessed our mission. And they were just focused on service. loving the Lord and serving the Lord. It was just a testimony to me of the great people who serve as senior missionaries.
Well, and I also think, in the temple, we make certain covenants with our Heavenly Father, and one of them is to consecrate ourselves to building up His kingdom. And if that's not motivation enough to serve, I don't know what else would be.
I love that. So for each of you, did you choose where you wanted to go? Did you say, Blaine, I want to go to Africa? Or did you just kind of throw your hat in the ring? And I'm curious, kind of the process there. Can somebody kind of, as a young missionary, you don't have any say in it. I know as senior couples, you do have more say. And I'm curious, what was your experience with that? And what would you say about that question?
Let me tell you, ours was interesting. My wife and I traveled quite a bit, and we traveled through Tonga one time. And Sue told me when we got on the plane to leave Tonga, she said, "This is where we're going on our mission." I said, "Oh, okay, looks good to me." It was a wonderful place. And so that was our plan, was to try to see if there was an opportunity in Tonga. And then when we were getting close to that date we had set for ourselves, I saw an email from one of my good friends, and he said his brother, who was also one of my friends, was a mission president in Africa, and they were having a hard time getting senior couples to go to Africa because it's a little bit of a different experience, and he really needed help. And when I read that, it just pierced me, and I was almost afraid to tell Sue about it, but I did. And she looked at me with this blank stare and she said, "Africa?" And I said, why don't you just pray about it?" And she did. And she went to the temple. And when she came back from the temple, she said, "We need to go." And I said, "Great." And I called that mission president and told him we were ready and willing. And he requested us and we requested him. And that's how it worked for us.
That's great.
And so it was a wonderful experience that way.
It's interesting how sometimes there's a network that might pull you to a specific area. Somebody. When we got called as mission leaders, I immediately went to our home teachers, said, "We can't go without you." They were preparing to leave, and they're like, "Great." And then a member of our high council and his wife, I saw him at church, and I just pulled him aside and said, "Hey, we can't go without you." And obviously, I didn't determine where they served, but as a mission president puts in a recommendation, that's something that the brethren consider, and the odds are very high in that case. But you have to be open to the fact that they might receive revelation about needing you somewhere else, and that happened with another couple in our stake. They thought they had been recruited to a mission, and the Lord sent them somewhere else. Right?
My brother by marriage, who's my brother-in-law, my wife's brother and his wife, my brother and sister-in-law, both did the same thing and were going to Africa. They speak Portuguese. They coordinated with the mission president, and everything was set, and they were sent to Denton, Texas. And then the second time, they came back, had a wonderful experience. They were a little disappointed, but they went, had a wonderful experience. They put in their papers a second time. And this time their son lives in New York City, and the New York temple needed Portuguese speakers. And they coordinated with the temple president, and everything was set up, and they were going to be there where their son was, and they were called to serve in the Palmyra temple. And so, the majority of the time it works out,
It's
but
like
sometimes
90%.
sometimes the Lord has other plans for you. And I'll say that my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are now on their fourth mission in Portugal. And they did serve a live-at-home mission at church headquarters. So they are now feeling, I guess they're keep at it until they connect with their desires.
How about for the two of you? Did you just turn your papers in, or were you?
Yeah, we did. And we just felt like now was the time in our life that was time to go. So we put them in. We did not have a specification. Got called to Singapore. and we were all prepared to go. We were buying our clothing for that. We were all ready to go. Because of COVID, they shut it down, and they said you might be able to get in about 6 months. And we just made a decision after they kept putting it off farther and farther back. We want to go now. Is there anywhere in the world where we can serve? And so we put in a new calling from our faithful stake president here, President Dixon. We put in a new application, and we get called to Ohio. Simple
Ohio, Singapore, tomato, right?
And there were some of my relatives thought, oh, that's disappointing. And I didn't feel that way. I really didn't.
No, we didn't at all.
And when we got there, and we just learned to love that sacred land of Ohio. It was so drilled into me when we got there that this land is truly sacred. So we loved it.
It's great. So now some people might be wondering about the cost of serving a mission. And it's not like it is for the young missionaries where there's just one single cost no matter where you go. Some missions are going to be more expensive than others. The brethren have done a wonderful thing by doing an equalized payment for your housing. So no matter where you live in the world, you're going to pay, I think right now, is it $1,400? And that, maybe in a year or two, someone listening to this, it will be a little bit different, but that's been equalized. But the other costs associated with where you might be living in the world, Africa versus London, might be significantly different.
It's my understanding it's not necessarily equalized as much as the limit is $1,400. In other words, if you go to an area and your monthly apartment rent is $900, you're paying $900. And if it's $2,000, you're paying $1,400.
And you also have to remember that the quotes that you see on the Senior Missionary website of opportunities available include insurance, medical insurance for you and your companion. So you have to take that into consideration, whether or not you're going to need that insurance or not.
Let me throw this in. It was cheaper for me to be on my mission than it was for me to be at home. Because my personal insurance, because I'm self-employed, was about, it was huge. I think it was $1,400 a month. And through the church, Sue and I only had to pay, I think it was around $700 a month.
We paid.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot less, and we saved money while we were on our mission. So it was great.
Well, I can say, Blaine, that for my wife and I, when we served as mission leaders, it was much, much cheaper because we no longer had children that came to visit who felt that our pantry was Harmon's or the bishop's storehouse. In fact, I tell my kids, do you see Bishop's storehouse on that pantry?
So often in our careers, a significant amount of our day is spent away from our spouse as we are each doing our own thing, and we come together at night and have that time together. But did any of you find that it was an adjustment to all of a sudden be 100% with each other all day long?
Well, I'll throw in there. I've heard that before, and in fact, I have a memory when I was a young missionary of the only couple we had at that time, and they were quite argumentative. But I'm just going to throw in that no. In our case, it was the opposite. Susan had never served, and when we were able to work together full time in the office, we grew together. I became more amazed at her talents and abilities that I'd never even known before. She just really shined, and she had such a great mind, and she kept the mission president right on track. And I just go, yeah, way to go, Sue.
That's my girl.
Sister Tuckett, not once did you call the mission president saying, I need a transfer? I'm just wondering.
No, I did not. But I will say this, as a senior couple, you don't have to go everywhere with your companion. And there are some times that I just needed to get out and go to the local Walmart and do some shopping. And it was just so there are ways, if it starts to feel a little like I need my own space, you can do it.
Yeah. You don't have that same restriction that the young missionaries have where you're with each other.
Yeah.
How about you, Blaine?
I will say this, it was a huge change for us because all through our married life, um, Sue and I had the same goals, and we were going on the same highway, but we had to divide and conquer. She had her bucket full of things to do. I had my bucket full of things to do, and then we would meet up again in the evening at the end of the day and see where we'd gone. But when we got on the mission, yeah, we were still on the same highway, but now we were in the same car going the same direction all the time. And so it was different. And I will mirror what Roger said. It was a noticeable change for us because it brought us closer together than we've ever been. I think we got to know each other better than we ever have. And I think the only time my wife got mad at me, which was pretty much daily, was when I was driving on the wrong side of the road in Africa.
White knuckling it.
Yeah, you got to get used to driving on the left side of the road over there, and it took me a while.
That would be hard.
There's so much to talk about on this subject. It seems that this would be a good time to end this first episode. Do you all mind continuing onward and spending some time on a second episode continuing our conversation, since there's so much to talk about?
Absolutely.
On the subject?
We'd be
Yes.
glad to.
That would be
Sure,
great.
thank you.
Thank you so much. We look forward to inviting you all to come back for the next episode. And if any of you can think of senior couples or people that are approaching that age that would benefit from this episode, we encourage you to share this link widely with others so that they can also benefit from it. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Preach My Gospel Mission Prep Podcast and that it helps you in your study of Preach My Gospel and preparing you for your mission. Please join us for our next episode. And if you feel this podcast might be helpful to others preparing to serve a mission, please invite them to join us on our journey through and discovery of Preach My Gospel. For more information on how to get Institute credit for this podcast and other offerings by the Utah Valley Institute of Religion, please visit utahvalleyinstitute.com. You may also find us on Instagram at Preach My Gospel Podcast. Feel free to send questions or comments to preachmygospelpodcast@gmail.com. The Preach My Gospel Mission Prep Podcast is produced with the permission of the Utah Valley Institute of Religion. The hosts are expressing their personal views based on their own experiences, applying the principles of Preach My Gospel, and accept full responsibility for the content in these podcast episodes.